Welcome, everyone. Today is May 13th, 2020, and I'm Dr. Terry Hildebrandt, the Director of Evidence-Based Coaching at the Fielding Graduate University. And we're really excited to have one of our alums from the Fielding Graduate University talking about non-financial adjustments in the retirement transition. Her name is Dr. Pauline Johnson Zalonska. I believe I have that right. She can correct me later if you want. And we're talking about all of these different issues that can come up with your clients in coaching. And some of these issues may be things you're facing right now if you're nearing retirement. So we welcome you live participants and those who are listening on the recording. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Dr. Pauline, to do a little bit deeper introduction, and then you can begin to share your slides.
Okay, great. Yeah, thank you, Terry. So yeah, I'll be discussing the social and psychological aspects of the retirement transition today. I'll review some themes that I've found in research on retirement adjustment, and then we'll talk a bit about what this means for helping clients in the transition. So I will go ahead and, looks like, am I able to share my screen, Terry?
Yeah, sorry, I need to make you a co-presenter. So
Okay.
I haven't quite done that yet. So give me just a moment to do that.
Okay, sorry about that.
Yeah,
Anyway, while you,
now you should be able to go ahead and share your slides.
okay, so there we go. So as Terry mentioned, I graduated from the HOD program at Fielding in 2012, and I'm now a fellow with the Institute for Social Innovation with Fielding. And that's where I'm continuing some of my research and work in this area. My interest on the topic began during my doctoral studies when I was interviewing people who were entering the retirement transition. And I was asking them about their expectations for life in retirement. And this is when I realized what a significant transition this can be for some people. Yet with there being a big emphasis and focus on well-being in the workplace, many people are simply left to their own devices when it comes to preparing for life in retirement. Existing advice can be a bit general and perhaps not really get at the underlying issues that retirees are facing. Common pieces of advice might include keep busy, make sure to have some hobbies, and maybe start volunteering. But these things alone do not necessarily lead to a fulfilling retirement. Sorry, need to get, there we go. We spend the majority of our adult lives working, and for many of us, it's a rewarding and really meaningful part of life. But even when we're not particularly satisfied with work, it can provide various benefits that might not become apparent until we're no longer working. For instance, we often complain about being constrained by work schedules, but then retirees often find that they miss the routine that work provides. Interestingly, the current circumstances, with many of us being on lockdown, it can provide a little bit of a glimpse into life after work or without work. And many people are seeing some of the things that they really miss about work or just going into the office even. Of course, there are other significant challenges posed by this current pandemic. Some people will experience the loss of loved ones, and many more people are experiencing significant financial strain. And this will push many people into retirement sooner than planned, before they're ready, both financially and psychologically. And then those who have recently retired might find that their visions for retirement have to be put on hold for a bit. So travel plans might have to wait, and time to see children and grandchildren might have to wait as well, as everybody is practicing social distancing. And of course, social activities might have to be postponed as well. And with the aging population around the world, this means there are a lot of people nearing retirement right now. In the US, nearly 10,000 people are turning 65 every day. So that's quite a big number, and many other countries around the world have similar numbers with aging populations. And while many people are planning to work longer and delay retirement, the average retirement age is 62 for women and 64 for men. By 2030, the youngest baby boomers will be turning 65. In the UK, similarly, the 65 plus age group is the fastest growing age group. Japan, Germany, and Italy are also countries with aging populations. So in this graph, you can see the percentage of the population that's in the labor force at different ages. But the point to highlight is that the average expected age for retirement is 66. But by age 63, over half of the population is no longer working. So there seems to be a disconnect between when people expect to retire and when they actually do. And again, this will probably only become more pronounced with the current pandemic and the economic impact that it's having. From this chart, you can see the percentage of retirees who are forced or partly forced to retire. And this is by year. So in 2014, you can see that roughly 55% of retirees were at least partly forced to retire. This is a huge statistic, especially when you consider the impact that this has on adjustment and well-being, let alone the financial impact as well. And this impact on well-being is at least partly captured by the same study when they're looking at the percentage of retirees who are very satisfied, moderately satisfied in yellow, or not satisfied, which you'll see in gray. So in 2014, around 45% of retirees were very satisfied, and about 15% were not satisfied. So somewhere around half of the retirees were quite satisfied. The rest were moderate to not satisfied. And although this study does not associate satisfaction with voluntary retirement, this is a pretty consistent finding that satisfaction is related to how voluntary the transition is. So is retirement a good thing? In popular media, you'll tend to see either very negative views of retirement or perhaps overly optimistic views. So on the one hand, it's described as leading to poor health and even death. And on the other hand, it's described as a time for travel, relaxation, hobbies, and a lot of the things we enjoy on the weekends. Many people might enjoy and do enjoy these benefits in retirement, but usually it's going to be a bit more complex and a mix between the two. So it'll have some pros and cons and some mixed emotions as well. And many people will go through a process of adjustment as they get used to this new lifestyle after many years of working. And again, for many people who have really enjoyed their work, it might be more of a process of adjustment. So in the 1970s, Robert actually outlined several stages of adjustment, and these still generally appear relevant today. But many people will experience this honeymoon phase where they enjoy a lot of the things we just mentioned, the travel, fixing up the house, hobbies that they usually would do on the weekends. But those things that we typically enjoy on the weekends can often lose their appeal when they become an everyday thing. And other activities might be a bit short-lived. So then people might begin to find that retirement isn't quite as enjoyable as they thought it would be. And they'll enter a period of disenchantment, or a less satisfying phase of retirement, and then enter this reorientation where they begin to reevaluate their plans for retirement and their vision for retirement. Others might simply decide to return to work at that point. Of course, not everyone experiences all of these phases in retirement. Some people will skip the honeymoon phase and go straight to disenchantment. For instance, those who are pushed to retire. And others might not experience much of a period of disenchantment at all. So after a honeymoon phase, they might sort of just settle into a new satisfying routine without much difficulty. So the process does, of course, vary from person to person, but the point is that there tend to be these general phases in the process to adjustment. And findings from this study highlight the individual differences in adjustment. So data were collected every 2 years, which is a pretty long time span, but you can still see these distinct patterns. With the blue line, you can see that the majority of retirees experience little to no change in their well-being after retirement. And then roughly 5% in this study started off with a somewhat low level of well-being on the green line here, and then they experienced an increase in well-being. And then with the red line, with nearly 30% of retirees, they experienced a temporary decline in well-being that was then followed by a recovery and a subsequent increase in their well-being. And these different patterns are associated with various factors. So those who experienced very little change in well-being were more likely to hold bridge jobs, to engage in retirement planning, and to have a spouse who was also retired. Those who experienced an increase in well-being after retirement tended to have physically demanding or stressful jobs before retirement and low job satisfaction. And then those who experienced a decline were more likely to also have a decline in health, be in an unhappy marriage, and retire earlier than expected. So basically, this reflects there are very different patterns of adjustment, and not everyone will struggle with retirement. Some people experience it more as a continuity, a continuation of their pre-retirement life, but some people do indeed appear to struggle. And several studies I came across suggest that as many as 1 in 3 people struggle with the retirement transition. And this has been associated with various factors. Of course, financial status, physical health, and marital status and quality can have a big impact on well-being. And you might notice as well, so on the left-hand side are the factors that have a positive influence. I should point that out. And then on the right-hand side, these are factors that have a negative influence on well-being in retirement. And they're not too different from what you might expect. But many of these factors are not so much within our control, and others we might have more control over. So retirement planning, volunteer work, and leisure activities, of course, are things we have more control over. Involuntary retirement, of course, as is suggested, is against your wishes. You don't have control over that. And then things like marital quality and physical health, you might have some control over it, but in the short term, you might not have as much control over it. So if you're nearing retirement, these aren't necessarily things that you can really have an impact on, I would say. So for me, looking at this research, the question still remains, how can we help people become better prepared for navigating this transition and achieving well-being in retirement? So in order to help people prepare for retirement, we need to understand the issues that they face. What do retirees struggle with? What are their experiences? And what do they find challenging about it? So this was the question that was central to my research on retirement adjustment. So I conducted a comprehensive review of research. I scanned the abstracts of around 400 studies, and I was looking for studies that focused specifically on adjustment issues. I only found a handful of studies that did that, and those tended to be a bit older. So I had to broaden my focus a bit, and I looked at studies that uh, were about the retirement experience in general, or retirement adjustment. So I narrowed it down to about 100 peer-reviewed articles. And this included pre-retirement and post-retirement experiences. Uh, it also included quantitative and qualitative studies, but I focused a bit more on qualitative descriptive data just to, again, better understand those experiences. And then from those studies, I really sifted through the findings to pull out what appeared to be reported adjustments and challenging experiences. Oftentimes, this meant in one study, you would have, a majority of participants that had a relatively easy time with retirement, and then maybe a minority who struggled with retirement. And so I would focus on the findings with those who were struggling and try to pull out what their experiences were. At the same time, those who had an easier time with the adjustment often would still mention some of the adjustments that they went through. Although maybe they didn't really have a big impact on well-being, they still reflected some of the experiences that people went through. So these are the themes that came out of that research. So there were numerous adjustments, and these fell into what I saw as kind of 5 general categories. Who you are refers to identity adjustments. What you do is about daily occupations and changes with that. Who is involved is about social networks and relationships, including family. How you structure it is about structuring free time or a lack of structure with free time. And then emotional reactions really could be more of a meta theme, because it's not an adjustment per se, but these reflect some of the emotional experiences that retirees described that could be associated with different aspects of retirement. And of course, not everyone will experience all of these, thankfully, but these reflect an array of experiences that some people may have, and to different levels of difficulty as well. So for some people, these adjustments might have a big impact on well-being, and for others, it's simply something they note in the experience as being a significant part of the adjustment. So I'll just run through a few of these for today's webinar. Disengagement from work reflects a pre-retirement experience where people tend to lose motivation and become less productive in the run-up to retirement. So there's a shift in their perspective on work and life outside of work, such that they develop more negative views of work and place greater value on other areas of life. So you can see this might be a challenge for employers who have retiring employees. But at the same time, researchers suggest that this might be a positive part of identity adjustment for the individual. It might make the retirement decision easier, and it simply allows or is part of people making that adjustment before they actually get to the retirement event, as they experience a shift in their values. A sense of shock was described by some retirees, and This really reflects the significance and emotion of the retirement event itself. This could be the last day of work, leaving the office, driving home from work, or waking up to the first day of retirement. It can be quite significant and unexpected and very emotional as well. One retired police officer described leaving the building on his last day of work and realizing he will not be able to re-enter the building without being escorted. Uh, so that was quite significant for him. Uh, Retired airline pilots also described a sense of denial lasting several weeks and even months into their retirement. Um, they do have abnormal work schedules, so these airline pilots were used to having several weeks off at a time. So their early part of retirement did not really seem that different from a usual period of time off of work. And role loss is one of the more widely reported and widely studied adjustment issues with retirement. However, it ranged in severity from a moderate sense of loss with regard to the work role to more significant feelings of bereavement and devastation. This may be linked to work role centrality, or the degree to which somebody is invested in their work role, and also the availability of alternative roles. So are you a grandparent, and do you have the opportunity to be involved in that role in retirement? Is that something you want to do or value? Or are you involved in meaningful volunteer work that you will continue with in retirement? I think all of those things can help ease the sense of loss with regard to the work role. And others who have really been invested in the work role simply find that they reach a point where they're just ready to retire and they're ready to make that change. So it's not necessary that everyone who is really invested in their career is going to have this significant loss and struggle with retirement. But all of these factors will influence that experience. So some retirees were described to find how much effort was required to maintain existing relationships and develop new ones. This was not a particularly challenging adjustment in and of itself, but you can see how it can have significant consequences for social involvement in retirement, which in turn has a big impact on well-being as well. Particularly for people who might not be very proactive about their social life. I think this highlights the way in which the workplace really provides a structured social outlet. So you go to work and you're sort of required usually to interact with other people. And as long as those interactions are mostly positive and supportive, then that's going to support well-being. And for many people, work is a primary social outlet. So that can be quite significant to leave that behind and then find that you have to recreate your own social environment in retirement. And reduced social interaction has a significant impact, of course, on psychological well-being, but also on physical health. So one study found that the social involvements of retirees had an impact on physical health that was comparable to that of physical exercise. So this is a really critical part of adjustment and general well-being. And of course, as many people fear with retirement, some retirees had a problem with the lack of engaging activities. Several studies highlight the importance of quality over quantity with regard to daily occupations and involvements. Retirees described missing the problem solving, opportunities to have an impact, and they felt they needed more meaningful pursuits. So rather than simply keeping busy, it's really important to look at the nature and the quality of the pursuits that people are involved in. Do they align with personal values and interests? And do they involve some sort of serious commitment or challenge? So, what does this mean for coaching clients in the transition? How can we support clients and help them become better prepared or to cope with adjustments that they're already facing? Uh, of course, as always is the case with coaching, I think we want to challenge assumptions about retirement, both our own assumptions and our clients' assumptions. What most people know about retirement is what they've learned from retirees who they've seen or from the media. And that's not always reflective of what their retirement experiences would be. As I mentioned earlier, some common negative assumptions are that retirement leads to poor health, boredom, and loneliness. But those negative views can lead people to avoid retirement and delay it as long as possible. But those who are pushed into retirement might find this then to be quite problematic as they've failed to develop plans and a vision for retirement. It may also lead to behaviors that simply support these beliefs. So, one study found that negative views of retirement and aging actually was associated with decreased longevity, so that those who had more positive views tended to live an average of 7 years longer than those who had negative views. And it's speculated that this might be because of the health behaviors that stemmed from those beliefs. Most clients will probably have more modest concerns about retirement, and so simply addressing some of these assumptions will help to ease some of the pre-retirement anxiety and also help them become aware of some of the opportunities that will become available with retirement, such as having more time for exercise, cooking healthy meals, having better sleep, and less stress. On the other end of the spectrum, the overly optimistic views can also be problematic in that they overlook some of the long-term adjustments that people may be facing. Uh, so you may face some unexpected challenges if you're only looking at sort of the projects around the house and the travel. So for these people, retirement can end up being quite disappointing, and they may end up going back to work for that reason. And this leads to the next point, which is to help clients plan beyond the honeymoon phase. So identify pursuits that might involve challenge, problem solving. What will retirement look like when you've finished the projects, the travel, or you've had enough of the relaxation? What sort of activities will provide fulfillment then? Again, take a look at the quality of the planned activities. Are these something that you might continue over the long run? And do they provide feelings of productivity, of having an impact? You might consider also how your clients are planning to structure their days. In the early part of retirement, most people do not want to have any sort of plans or any sort of structure for the day. But as after a while, a bit of routine is much more beneficial for well-being. And you may also want to watch for some red flags. Some of the big ones associated with a difficult retirement include, again, involuntary retirement. Health decline may impact what people are able to do with their retirement, how they can spend their time. Financial difficulty also can cause a great deal of stress and limit what people are able to do with their retirement. And low marital satisfaction for those who are married. Retirement is a time where you will probably spend more time with your spouse than ever before. And so the issues can become really magnified. And then you might also assess how well prepared your client is in each of the themes highlighted from this research. So do they have alternative roles that they will be engaged in retirement? Do they have serious hobbies? Or how do they feel about leaving work behind? And what social connections do they have outside of work? Have they communicated their expectations with family members? I think that's something that's often overlooked. And then again, what sort of routines might they start with retirement? Uh, you might also consider their personality traits as well. So how introverted or extroverted somebody is going to impact what their social involvements might look like in retirement, ideally. Also need for achievement and preference for structure could all play into this as well. So I think that wraps it up for today's webinar. With just a quick review of some of the research findings and how this might apply to your coaching. If you're looking for more information, you can, of course, reach out to me. If you go to my website, you'll find a little bit of information about a retirement life coaching course and my book, which the book is based on this research, but is written as a really light and easy read to help people begin thinking about these aspects of retirement.
Excellent. Thank you, Polly. All right, we're going to open it up to the audience for some live questions. So feel free to unmute yourself and turn on your video if you would like to ask a question or offer a comment. So this will be an open dialogue with the author today. If you'd rather me read your question, feel free to just post it in the chat room. But who has a question or comment that'd like to kick us off? I think, Laura, you had a bit of feedback there from your telephone that you might have to hang up. So I went ahead and muted you. Lynn, I see you've come on live. Do you have a question?
Yes, I was curious, Pauline, about what you meant around the family expectations.
Okay, yeah. So I think generally couples, not generally, but it can be the case that couples simply assume that they're on the same page with their retirement plans. So they have some big ideas about how they would like to spend their retirement, and they assume that their spouse would like to do the same.
Okay.
This could even include the idea of moving in retirement or things that are pretty big and significant. Even the decision to retire itself. Oftentimes one person will decide they're ready to retire and they haven't really discussed their spouse's plans for retirement. Are they ready? Sometimes women want to continue working much longer than men because they've maybe had a pause in their career earlier, so they're sort of just reaching their peak when their husbands are ready. So those sort of things. Then there's kind of the more practical day-to-day expectations, so just about how you plan to spend the day, spending time around the house, household responsibilities, just, yeah, many different pieces to that. But even just starting that conversation, it can be missed.
Okay, thank you. I'm getting a taste of that during this COVID thing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Laura, do you have a question for us?
Oh, I'm sorry. Terry, were you asking if I have a question?
Yeah, I saw you turn your video on. I thought you might have a question.
I just came on my computer. I turned off my, I was driving earlier and
Perfect.
and I just got home and to my home office and I thought I would join in this way.
Okay, perfect.
No question at the moment.
Great.
I enjoyed the presentation though, Pauline. It was great.
Oh, good.
Lots to think about.
Yeah.
Excellent. We do have a question from the audience that's been typed in. So I'm going to go ahead and read it. Do you partner with financial advisors or have any content that would be beneficial to help pair with the financial aspects of retirement?
Yeah, so I have been in touch with financial advisors and have partnered with them. Uh, at the moment, my focus has been on developing courses um, to help coaches kind of continue to develop their expertise in this area. But certainly, I think that all of this matches up really well with financial planning. And the finances are really a foundation for retirement planning, right? And so I think that that is a critical part of it. And if we can just include this as well, it'll do so much more. So.
Okay, perfect. Jeff, would you like to ask your question, or shall I read it for you?
Either way, I'm just interested, Pauline, if you've done any research or looked at the research about calling, the relationship between having a calling and I put retirement in quotes because I just don't like the word, but that second adulthood period.
I haven't focused specifically on that research, but yeah, it's certainly relevant and it comes up, and I'd be interested in talking to anybody who does focus on that research, of course, because it's very relevant. I think one thing that I've noticed with people nearing retirement is sometimes they're looking for something really big to sort of drive their life in retirement and to have a big calling and have a big sense of purpose. When it might be easier to break it down a little bit and look at kind of the meaningfulness in daily pursuits and starting small. But it can go either way. Certainly having a calling, I think, certainly supports the retirement adjustment. But sometimes looking for that, I think, can be a bit of a challenge.
Great.
Anyway.
Thank you,
Thank
Pauline.
you.
And thank you, Jeff. Anyone else like to come on live and ask a question? Oh, we have one. Viv, go ahead. And you're on mute. You might have to unmute yourself.
I got it. Pauline, my question is somewhat related to that which was just asked, and it has to do with encore careers.
Mm.
And are you seeing an increase? I know you were sort of emphasizing the retirement piece, but I wonder to what extent that encore-ness came into your research and maybe had something to do with that calling piece.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a big trend right now. People want to work longer, and they're looking for maybe finding new forms of work, either continuing what they've been doing in some form or looking to do something really different from what they've done before. So I think there's a big interest in that, but it's also a struggle. It's difficult for older workers to get hired into new jobs. Entrepreneurship is also quite difficult, and in some ways I think that the difficulty with entrepreneurship maybe is a little bit underemphasized for older workers and people looking for these kind of encore opportunities as well. So that yeah, I think that there's an interest in continuing work and having encore careers, but there's also a lot of challenge with that as well that we need to acknowledge, especially if somebody is looking to leave their current work and do something new. Yeah.
Great. We have one more question from Tracy. Do you want to ask your question?
Yeah, I'd be happy to jump in. And great presentation, Polly. Really appreciate this. So one thing I was wondering about, was there any research about the percent of the population that actually takes time to intentionally think about what they want to do with their time after retirement?
Not that I'm recalling specifically at the moment now. And it's not always clear to me when I'm looking at this research, when they say retirement planning, what does that mean? You know,
Mm-hmm.
what are they doing with that retirement planning? So, yeah, I think even financial planning sometimes isn't done as much as it should be done for retirement. So.
Yeah, I can see that. And I think that financial planners are beginning to ask people the questions so that they can help them set their financial goals, but they're not able to coach through that conversation, right? They're just asking, do you have plans, and setting financial goals around that. So, okay, that's helpful. Thanks again.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Thank you. And something else, just I'll make a note while I think there's a pause right now, but in speaking with financial advisors, I've had several who come to me and say, I have clients that are ready to retire financially. So maybe they meet with a financial advisor and they say, look, you could retire tomorrow if you want. And then the client is sort of, looks like they've been kind of hit by a bus. Like, wait, what do you mean? I don't know if I'm ready to retire. So that's kind of flips it around, that people realize they've been saving for it for so long, but they're not sure they want to actually give it up. So.
Mm-hmm.
Great, thank you. Laura, if you wouldn't mind asking your question.
Okay. Yes, this time I do have a question, Terry. Yeah. Pauline, I thought that the research on positivity in retirement and longevity was interesting. And I understood you to say that it was likely that more positive people probably engaged in more healthy behaviors. And I'm intrigued by this and wonder if there's any specific research on it, particularly in light of some of the positive psychology research out there that relates positivity to longevity generally, not just in retirees. I guess what I'm asking is if there's any research that suggests there's more to it than healthy behaviors.
I did not get into that myself. So okay. I think, yeah, that's a great question. But it's one of those pieces of the discussion with the research article about why would this be, that the positive beliefs are associated with people living longer. And I think that's probably one of the most obvious answers, is that it leads people to take actions that will improve their health. Yeah, but that's a great question.
So Polly, I have a question for you. So as coaches, and I know this morning we had a coach who was interested in focusing on folks in retirement or moving to retirement. Any specific recommendations that you might have for someone interested in focusing or specializing in this niche?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's a great idea. There's a lot of work to be done in the area, right? So we need to make people a bit more aware of the needs for preparing for life in retirement. But they're just, with the aging population, and I think now with our current circumstances, there are just so many people entering a potentially difficult retirement. So again, from my perspective, I just saw how much focus there was on well-being in the workplace, and yet when it comes to retirement, people are sort of just dropped off the cliff, left to their own devices to figure things out. And it's assumed that it's an easy transition. So, of course, on my website, I'm hoping to, I have information about a course up there now to help people specialize in this area. And I'm hoping to just get more information up there. But yeah, I don't know if there's something more specific you were.
No, I think that's great. And your research certainly helps us begin that process of educating ourselves on what some of the important issues are. So I really appreciate it. Lynn, do you have a question or thought?
Yes, I do. I was just thinking about your book, Pauline. I'm looking forward to reading it, and the importance of planning. And yet, what I found in my work with people who are about to embark on their third chapter or their second chapter, however they describe it, they bring with them a lot of the way that they planned in their work life. So, you know, a lot about what they're going to do and about, you know, sort of very linear goals. And there's less of I guess, a starting point around who they're going to be or who they're becoming, because there's that whole letting go of a work identity that they carried with them for so long. Do you know, get like that deeper work around who do I want to be in this last or maybe next chapter of my life?
Yeah. I think that that's kind of the central component to the rest of this, right? Is who are you? You know, and I think many people around this time in life are naturally experiencing changes in their values, and that drives a change in everything else. So oftentimes you'll hear people say, oh, I'm never going to retire. I have no interest in it. And then a few years later, they're saying, well, actually, I think I might slow down, you know. So, and I think it's just a reflection of that shift in values. In terms of leaving the work role behind and that identity, it is a tricky one, and I think in some ways you are leaving it behind, but it still remains a part of who you are very much. You know, it's a part of your life story, and I have come across research and just some writing in general that suggests people who have that strong work role identity might actually manage the adjustment well, as that continues to be an important part of them in their retirement. So it's not necessarily that they're letting it go completely. It continues to be very relevant, but they're just shifting gears and shifting their focus in life, and seeing the opportunities and maybe focusing more on alternative roles rather than just leaving something behind.
So maybe we have time for one more question. Oh, here we have one from Dennis. Dennis, would you like to come on live?
Sure.
Go ahead, we hear you.
Okay. Hi, Pauline. Hey, I was just curious. I have an assumption, and that is that most retirement coaches are themselves retirees. I'm not sure if that assumption is correct. And then if it is correct, I'm curious how coaches who are not themselves retirees, what kind of challenges they face in terms of credibility and things like that might exist.
Yeah, I mean, obviously I haven't retired. So I think I can relate to this question really well, because I have seen that a lot of people who retire and then find, oh, wait, this is kind of a difficult transition, maybe decide to become a retirement coach. So the way that I kind of got into this area was really different in that I was somebody interested in, you know, personality assessments and well-being at work. And then I just saw that, and I also really enjoy my work. So when we leave this behind, what happens? I think that the advantage that retirement coaches have who have not retired before is that they're not going to rely on their own experiences, but they can be a bit more objective about it. So I think, as I was looking at earlier in the slides, there are a lot of assumptions that people make about retirement, and the experience really is very different for each individual. And just as we coach people in their careers, retirement is going to really depend on the individual and their circumstances, preferences, and so forth. So I think that one of the problems with people becoming retirement coaches after they retire and then providing advice based on their own experiences is that it's too much based on their own experiences, possibly. Not necessarily, but.
That makes sense. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
So we had one last question from Jenny. Would you like to ask your question, Jenny?
Sure. So for someone who is already certified with ICF, how much would your coaching course cost?
Yeah, so right now it's $1,100, and I'm looking to get ICF credit approval for that. But you can find information about that on the website as well, or I can send you a flyer.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jenny. Well, Pauline, it's been wonderful having you. Thank you for your very informative presentation and great conversation we've had following it. And where can people learn more about you? Can you put up your final slide with your contact information?
Oh, yeah. Sorry. There we go. Yeah, so my website is retirementlifeplan.com. And you can also find me on LinkedIn, contact me there. The website at the moment is really just a landing page with information about the course, but we'll be getting more information up there soon. So.
Okay, perfect. Well, thank you for coming and sharing your wisdom and your research. We really appreciate all that you're doing in this space. It's certainly an up and coming important space for millions of people and counting all the time. So
yeah,
thanks
yeah.
again. I do
Thank
have
you.
Great. So I do have just a couple of quick announcements. If you are interested in learning more about coaching at Fielding, we have a website, coach.fielding.edu. So it's just coach.fielding.edu. This is the website where you can have access to all the previous Thought Leaders webinar. Tonight was a Thought Leaders webinar, and you will see those posted here on this website. This webinar included, and all of our previous research-based webinars. We also have what we call professional series webinars, and these are more about application of theory and coaching, including business building. So if you're needing to know about how to use LinkedIn to build your business, or book yourself solid and gaining more clients, and all the various ways coaching can apply in every profession, we highly recommend you to check out these webinars. We also have a community of practice. If you've not yet joined the community of practice, anyone is welcome to join who has a passion or interest in coaching. This website, ccop.fielding.edu, talks about the community of practice. This event right now is a program of the community of practice, and we offer 2 to 3 webinars every month. We also have a base camp where you can post questions and ask for support. All you have to do is click the subscribe button. It'll take you a short survey where you can give us permission to add you to the base camp. Lastly, we want to announce, if you haven't yet heard, our new book, Innovations in Leadership Coaching, launched last Friday, May 8th. So this book is now available on Amazon for the low price of $10 for Kindle and $20 for paperback. So we hope you will enjoy this new book. It's showcasing the research of Fielding scholar practitioners, as well as new models and theories and practices in the field of coaching. So we hope you enjoy this new book. We will also be having webinars for the next year for each of the chapters. The authors will be coming on live to talk about their chapter, and you'll be able to learn more about each of the chapters and the research therein. There's also a series of brief 2-minute webinar or 2-minute videos from the authors as well that you can listen to live right now, and that's on coach.fielding.edu. You scroll down a little bit and you'll see the video chapter briefs by the editors, so you can get an insight of what the book chapters are about. So we look forward to having you on one of our upcoming webinars. The big book launch is on Monday, May 18th. So if you are interested in joining us for the book launch, we'll have the editors of the book talking about the book in general and what you can expect from that. And you can always find all of our webinars, if you're curious about them, on our blog. So if you go to coach.fielding.edu and click on EBC blog, then you can see all of our upcoming events, including the May 18th launch of the book, and then all of the other book chapter webinars, and then anything else that may be coming up in the future. So the easy to get to, it's just fielding.edu/blog. So we look forward to learning more and talking to you in the recent and upcoming webinar or through our videos if you don't have a chance to watch live. So thank you for coming, and thank you, Pauline, and your presentation was amazing, and we look forward to staying in touch.
Great, thanks.
Take care, everyone. Have a great evening.